Hey everybody, welcome back to Run and Gun. I'm JT, and this is going to be kind of a different video. I'm in Lightroom right now, and I just kind of want to record a little bit of a photo talk, photo vlog kind of thing. I've never really done this before, but we're going to try and see how it goes. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about this video as I edit in Lightroom and kind of tell you guys a little bit what's going on with my life. So if you want to just follow along with the photo editing, feel free to mute me at any time. So I'm here in Lightroom and I'm messing around with some of the images I shot for my portrait lighting hacks video. And if you haven't seen that yet, that video kind of blew up. So I appreciate all the support for it. And I definitely have to do more videos like that. But anyway, this video will be linked in the description. I thought it was kind of neat. And it's 9 portrait lighting hacks in 90 seconds. I'm kind of just going through some images that I shot. Wow, I guess it's been about 2 years back in Maine. I think this was fall of 2017. I had a great time out there. I did a little road trip up the East Coast. I stopped up in Rhode Island. I drove up to Acadia Park, Acadia National Park. That was an awesome place. I ended up missing the whole fall season by a couple weeks, which kind of stinks, but oh well, it happens. You can't line up a road trip with nature all that well. It never really ends up working out. So here are a couple images of a lighthouse that I photographed. I had to climb down. You can see it on the right-hand side when I zoom out. I had to climb down this giant cliff to get down to this lighthouse, and it was a total pain. And then hiking around on the way up, I found almost like a little set of rock stairs. So I had just gotten my GH5, and I shot these on my Panasonic GH5. And I ended up slipping on these rocks down here and busted my back and almost busted my GH5. I scuffed it up a little bit. And I had just purchased my GH5, so it was brand new. I was really, when you buy a brand new camera, you try and baby it a little bit. But so here you can see in Lightroom, I'm just kind of doing some sharpening, some masking, and a little trick. If you hold Alt, it'll turn your image black and white for the amount of sharpening and the radius and the detail. And if you hold Alt while sliding the masking slider, it will show this kind of neon looking image, and the parts of the image that are bright white are being sharpened, and as you slide the slider up and down, the parts that are black are not being sharpened. So it helps sharpen the areas of higher contrast and does a little bit less sharpening to the areas that are just kind of flat or should be smooth, like the sky. I don't really need a lot of sharpening in the sky. If I sharpen it too much, I'm just going to be bringing out a lot of noise. So the masking really helps with that. And right now you can see I'm just kind of messing with white balance a little bit. There's 2 or 3 different ways this image can go. I can mess around with it, make it kind of blue. I can make it kind of warm. And it could really go either way. The warmer, to me, kind of looks like an early morning sunset. And when I decide to go cooler, it looks a little bit more like a late evening, almost night, kind of that blue hour right after the sun sets and right after golden hour. So kind of just messing with details in here. You can see these rocks, super slippery. They had a nice coating of water and coating of slime, and pretty easy to bust your back on. And I believe this was the Portland Head Lighthouse in Portland, Maine, if I'm not mistaken. Kind of the entire purpose of this trip for me was to photograph lighthouses. I had kind of a handful that I was looking for. I put them into Google Maps and made a road trip kind of around some of the coolest lighthouses I found on the kind of upper east or New England coast. But the names of all these lighthouses after 2 years kind of just blend together. So there was a little bit of fog on the coast, and I kind of want to cut through some of that. I want to be able to see some of these. You can almost see sun rays in there a little bit, or you can at least see where there's a lack of sun ray with this little bit of a line that you can see right above the lighthouse. It was a little bit blue in comparison, and then as you got down towards the horizon, you could see some more of those orangey purple shades. And like I said, there's so many different ways I can edit this image. I will end up doing 2 different ways. I'll do a cool look and I'll do a nice warm look. Feel free to let me know down in the comments which one you like best. And at any point in this video, feel free to just pause it and let me know what you guys think, which edit you like the best. or maybe something that I missed that you would have done to this image. And you could see a second ago, I just hit the backslash key and that will show me a before and after. So there's so much you can do in Lightroom with the way it's set up and the slider-based editing. You can make very subtle edits to your raw imagery, or you can make some very heavy-handed edits where you just kind of take a sledgehammer to your image. And I find that I like kind of a mix between the two sometimes. If I'm doing kind of vacation photos, kind of like this, I like doing very subtle edits. Maybe a year or two, I'll come back to this image, kind of like I'm doing now, and make some heavier-handed edits and see what I can do kind of as I learn more editing techniques. And as you can see, doing some noise reduction. There's a little bit of a glitch going on right now with Lightroom, chugging through some memory here. But again, just like sharpening, when you're doing noise reduction, if you hold Alt, you can see a black and white version of the image, and it helps a lot when you're doing some noise reduction. And I also love playing in this little HSL, or hue saturation and luminance tab in Lightroom. And there's just so much you can do, especially if you use this little targeted adjustment tool, which is the little bit of it looks like a circle with the arrow on the top and the arrow on the bottom. You can select hues from your actual photo instead of trying to look at the slider on the right and try and guess which photo you're guess which colors and hues you're messing with. It's so much easier just to go into the image and select exactly what area of the image you want to mess with. And you can see here, I'm just kind of playing with some of the yellows and the oranges. I'm trying to make this a little more orangey instead of so harsh of a red. But I'm going to hit that targeted adjustment slider again, and I'm going to play with some of the saturation now. I really want to bring out some of these blues and reds and some of this color contrast. I apologize for my neighbors upstairs if you can hear that. They're doing some sanding or some grinding or chopping up bodies upstairs. I really don't know what, but they like to be annoying every now and then, so I apologize for that throughout this video. And I'm probably going to have to deal with that issue until I move to a new apartment. But again, as I was talking about heavy-handed edits, sometimes you can crank these sliders a little bit too far and it will jack up your image, even if you're working in RAW. RAW carries so much more data than Lightroom. You can check out my RAW versus JPEG video if you want to know a little bit more about the difference between RAW and JPEG and how much more data and information you have in a RAW image versus a JPEG and how much more editing you can do to it. But again, RAW still has a little bit of a limit. Even with a RAW photo, you can't take an image right now with the technology we have that's 10 stops under exposed and still get a good looking image. So RAW still has its limits. There's only, 23, 24, 25 megabytes worth of data in a RAW file. So there's only so much you can do with it. And a little trick, I actually have a video on this as well that I'll link to in the description. But I really like to use black and white when I'm messing with the contrast of my image. Just like sharpening and just like noise reduction, it's kind of like a little Lightroom hack that I use. If you change your image to black and white while you're messing with the contrast, it helps your eyes kind of focus in on the luminance contrast and less on the saturation. And I can really bring in those blacks where I want them, or I can bring in the whites or the midtones, the highlights, the shadows, get everything kind of right where I want it, and having your image in black and white. And the shortcut for that is just the letter V on the keyboard to switch and toggle back and forth between black and white and color in Lightroom. And now you can see I'm kind of messing with our little tone curve tool in Lightroom. I don't like the tone curve tool in Lightroom as much as I like the one in Photoshop. I think the Lightroom one is a little bit glitchy and I usually end up messing with it. I get a little bit frustrated with it. I'll come down here, I'll mess with the sliders a bit, and then I end up just kind of going back and changing the point curve, usually to medium contrast, I think is kind of the center value. There's linear, there's medium contrast, and strong. Strong is usually a little bit too much. Linear is a flat line, which means you're not doing anything. But medium contrast usually looks pretty good. Gives you a little bit of that S curve that we've talked about in a lot of videos. just bumping up your highlights slightly and just bringing down your shadows and your blacks just slightly. And again, I don't like the tone curve in Lightroom all that much. I will usually finish my edit in Photoshop by exporting out of Lightroom, editing in Photoshop, adding a little bit of sharpening, sometimes a little bit of noise reduction, sometimes a little bit more retouching, sometimes a LUT, but 99.9% of the time, almost 100% of the time, I'm always going to add just a little bit of a curve to that edit. So now I'm just kind of playing with what would this look like if I gave it like an old Polaroid look or kind of a film look. I don't know if I like it all that much, but there's a lot that you can do with split toning with the highlights and the shadows, and you can do some pretty cool stuff down here. And yeah, not too much down here that I'm really loving. As you can see on the left-hand side, you see all of your options on the right-hand side for these tabs. And on the left-hand side of the little tabs or sections, you can see that it looks like a little toggle switch with a gray top and a darker gray bottom. That's just a little switch to switch on that tab or switch it off. You can see if I click on and click off, I'm playing with a vignette right now, and super helpful tool. And then again, there's the before and the after. I think this image looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with where it's at. At this point, I'm gonna mess with another gradient. I really love the sky in this image, but I'm not a huge fan of these rocks. So I'm gonna try another gradient mask or gradient filter, and that's a bit too much. But I actually got super sidetracked, and I want to come back to a point that I was talking about. I may bring these blues in a little bit, maybe not. I want to come back to a point I was talking about earlier with the slider-based editing in Lightroom. It's always a good idea to kind of mess with the slider, play with it, bring it to 100, see what it does, bring it to -100, see what that does, and then you'll usually find kind of a happy medium, about 50% in between. But it's always a good idea, as you're doing this, the sliders react differently to different images because different images have different histograms. And you can see as I'm messing with these sliders, if you take a look at the upper right with my histogram, I always like to keep that open because different images, there is no right or wrong histogram. Let's start out with that. Every image is going to have a slightly different histogram, and I think now is a great opportunity to talk about that a little bit. But the way these sliders act and the way the whole Lightroom algorithm acts to edit your photo and all the formulas that it does, super complicated, but every slider acts a little bit different depending on the image. So you may bring in one image that's pretty dark and you'll notice that the shadow slider does a whole heck of a lot and really brings up those shadows, because in your histogram, you'll have a lot of information in that shadow area. Again, kind of the before and the after of this image. I'm liking where it's going. I'll keep tweaking and making some minor edits. And again, when you're in the gradient mask area over here and you have that tab open, you can't zoom into your image by clicking the image anymore. It just brings up a little hand for the hand tool to move around. You're gonna actually have to hit the letter Z on the keyboard to zoom in and then hit the letter Z again to zoom out. And I'm kind of messing with the sharpening settings here. How much noise removal do I want in this image? It is a little bit noisy because I brought up some of the shadows, but the GH5 does surprisingly pretty well in some of the shadow detail. With just a touch of noise reduction in Lightroom, I can make it look really awesome. And I'm trying to bring out kind of that glistening glow of the rocks. They, as the tide was starting to go out or come in, I'm not sure which one it was, the rocks were starting to get nice and wet, and I really want to show that. And the more clarity and the more sharpening and lifting up my shadows I do, you can see some of those highlights on the rock. And then again, you can see the before and after. It went from a very dull, boring image to a little bit nicer image. And that's kind of what I wanted my image to look like. So a really cool thing you can do is create a virtual copy in Lightroom. right click, select virtual copy, and it's going to create an exact replica of the image that you were just messing with. And what's awesome about this does not take up any more space on your hard drive. It does a little bit. It's a matter of kilobytes, not megabytes. It's not the same as copying and pasting a raw photo on your hard drive and having two exact same copies of a raw photo. What it's actually doing, Lightroom is saving a copy of your edits and your manipulations, and it's saving a copy of your metadata. What's super awesome about the whole virtual copy is you can have 1,000 virtual copies of an image, and it may only take up a couple megabytes versus having 1,000 copies of the actual image, and you're going to be taking up gigs and gigs of hard drive space. So right now, if you're still following along, I appreciate it. We're about 17-ish minutes into this video, and I'm just kind of messing with the crop. I really like this widescreen crop. You'll see me use it a lot, 16:9. It just has this very cinematic feel. That's a little bit what I'm going for, a little bit more in this, this cooler edit. And this kind of looks like it's either probably about 20 minutes to an hour before sunrise. Yeah, let's really emphasize that cool feeling, bring in our vibrance a little bit more. And like I said, this image had a little bit of purple and blue in the sky, and it also had that kind of purple, pink, orange in the lower areas of the sky. So like I said, this image could go either way. I'm going to bring in some of those purples. I'm not a huge fan of in either one of these edits having much green in there. Just don't think of green when I think of a lighthouse. I usually think of bright red colors or some deep blue, maybe some sky blue colors. I really like where this is going. And in this particular image, you can see the actual light from the lighthouse. I ended up taking 3 or 4 shots. I had my tripod with me. I found out kind of where my light was, what I wanted my light to look like. I got there super early in the morning. I think this was probably about 5:30, right up on the coast in fall, right before the sun came up, probably about 30-ish minutes. Got my tripod out, framed up my shot the way I wanted it, and then I waited for the exact moment where that light kind of spun around. Took a couple tries. I never really got it exactly where I wanted it. I didn't really want the light, 100% beaming into my camera, but I kind of like that little bit where you can see it just a touch to show that it is a lighthouse. It is working. There's light coming from it, and that plays really well with the contrast when I start messing with making this image a little bit darker in this early morning edit. And as you can see now, I'm playing with another one of those gradient filters or gradient masks, whatever you'd like to call it, and just kind of messing with the subtleties in the sky. I really like this blue. Again, I'm bringing out that cloud up on top and that layer of, you can kind of see that layer of fog and haze. It's right above the rocks, and it just adds some nice gradient contrast in the sky. I can mess with dehaze, which dehaze adds some contrast to your image. Dehaze is kind of like adding a little bit of clarity, bringing in the blacks, and also warming up your image a touch. You could see that on the left-hand upper corner of the image, it started bringing in some orange colors. Again, we can go back and see this is what the image was before with the warm edit, and this is my cool edit. So we'll keep looking through, messing with split toning. Nothing too crazy here. I don't think I ended up liking any of these edits that much. Yep, I wasn't a huge fan of split toning, brought in some of the purples and the blues, but this is a great opportunity to use my HSL tab. So if you guys are watching this video, I'm actually heading to New York City next week, and by next week, I mean tomorrow. If you're watching this video, I'm packing up. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, heading out to New York City for a week. Let's see, I'm going to be going to Photo Plus Expo. I have a handful of photo shoots lined up. Photo Plus Expo is going to be pretty cool. If you're going to be there, feel free to come up, say hi. Love to meet you. And if you see me wandering around the city, Or if you'd like to meet up, grab a beer, something like that, just let me know. Direct message me on either Twitter, Instagram, something like that. Not 100% sure how much time I'm going to have. My schedule is pretty darn packed right now. I think so I'm going to be there, not including travel days, 5 or 6 days. Travel days are going to be a little bit hectic, so when I leave that day, I won't be shooting. And the night I come in, depending on how tired I'm going to be, may or may not be shooting that night. You can see again here my edit going back and forth between that black and white. And interesting thing about Lightroom, I don't fully understand this, but when you change between black and white, your split toning still applies to your image. So even if you hit that letter V, make your image black and white, the split toning that you did still has an effect on your image, and you'll have to manually shut that on or off in addition to turning your image black and white if you want a truly black and white image. But that's a good way to get like a sepia tone, or I guess selenium tone, or like an alternative processed image. You can do that, turn your image black and white, and then start adding those sepia tones, or however you want to do that. But back to my travels. Again, I'll be in New York City. I have another shoot with Eli, that awesome Spidey guy that I showed you guys a while back. I guess it's been a while. I haven't been to New York since April. Yeah, it's been April. That was when I did my shoot with Spidey. I'll also link to that video. I kind of did a little bit of behind the scenes, but you are in luck. I've been talking with him, and we're going to do a lot more behind the scenes work this time, and I'm going to set up some cameras and kind of show you a little bit more what I'm doing when I'm shooting behind the scenes with some of these models in New York. So now here's the before and the after, and then here is Lightroom kind of freaking out because Lightroom likes to chug a lot of memory. And here is our cool edit. But you could see before Lightroom kind of freaked out, which Lightroom does every now and then. There is my warm edit, and right next to it was my cool edit. And I had a lot of fun making this. Hopefully you guys learned a couple little tips and tricks. Here are some other images that I edited. You can see I played around with that kind of orange and teal look, some of the befores and some of the afters after I applied my cool and lifted LUT to these images. You can see a lot of these were some of the tests that you can see on my website for my cool and lifted LUT, and some of the other LUTs that I posted up there at therunandgun.com if you want to check out my website. But highly recommend doing just a photo road trip if you've never done that before. It's an absolute blast. It's a little bit hard if you're not planning to take photos on a road trip and you're just planning to get somewhere. Photos will really slow you down. I love this image of this blue and orange, kind of has that orange and teal look all by itself. This crab, part of a crab that I found in the claw. It looked awesome. But again, you can kind of see the befores and the afters of some of my images. And then after I edit my images, sometimes I go through, look at some of the other raws, sometimes an hour later, sometimes a day later, come back, make some minor tweaks, and always good to have a fresh set of eyes on your imagery. And then sometimes I realize, hey, I like the way I did it the first time. But that is all for this video. Hope you enjoyed this kind of different video. If you like this, make sure you give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends if you learned something. Hit that subscribe and notification button so you know when all of my videos are going to be released. And yep, that's it for this video. I'll see you guys next weekend, or if you're in NYC this week, I'll see you out there. And until next time, get out and go shoot.